4-star mini gaming YouTube video. Once again, we are continuing our Balance of Power War Scroll review, and this is part 3 of what will be 4 in total. We are covering the Fyreslayer and Skaven War Scroll Battalions because, once again, the rats and dwarves are fighting. Classic enemies that, as long as there's a Warhammer Fantasy realm, these two will probably always be at each other's throats. So first we'll begin with the bearded folk, and here's what you need. You need one Grimwrath Berserker, who becomes the character Arngard, one Battlesmith, who is the character Turgon, and 3 units of Volkite Berserkers. And now, it's nice that they, name both these characters, because obviously they're named from a fluff perspective, and this little kind of war band that you're building, reflects something from the narrative. But in terms of the gameplay, it actually doesn't really matter that the Battlesmith is named Turgon or anything, because none of the special rules that apply for this War Scroll Battalion even affect him. Really, all of these rules just kind of make the Grimwrath Berserker, who is like the leader of this War Scroll Battalion, at least from, these rules standpoint. You don't have to pick him as your leader of your army, but kind of like the pseudo leader is just made into a significantly stronger character. So the 2 abilities are Spirit of Grimnar and Inspiring Lord of Destruction, and both these are abilities that take place during the combat phase. The first one is at the start of the combat phase, once during the game, Arngard, which is your Grimwrath Berserker, can become one with the Spirit of Grimnir. When he does so, any wounds he has suffered are healed, and for the remainder of that combat phase, his Firestorm Great Axe has a damage value of 3 rather than D3. So that's pretty good, if he's in a situation where maybe he's in trouble, you instantly heal him of all the wounds he's taken, and his axe that turn will do the maximum damage that it could normally do. And then the second one is if Arngard inflicts 6 or more wounds in a combat phase, then add 1 to the attacks of all other units from this War Scroll Battalion that are within 7 inches of him, for any weapons that they use in close combat. So if they have multiple different ones, then they can use all of them with the +1. So clearly, both, you want to probably use both those in the same turn. I mean, the second one is not a single time use, but the first one is, and it means that most most combat phases you will be wanting to attack with your Grimwrath Berserker immediately, so that your other units can kind of gain the benefits that he gives. It's not a particularly, in my opinion, impressive War Scroll Battalion if you're playing in a comp system that limits those, and you're just taking a small Fyreslayer group, and you're having to choose. I don't necessarily recommend this one if you have another option in your force. The abilities are nice in the sense that they turn the Grimwrath Berserker even more, into a more beefy character, but it's nothing to write home about. And then with the Skaven one, which both these I feel like are pretty flavorful, but I feel like this one, kind of to a fault, focuses too much on just making the commander a more powerful model, as opposed to necessarily really building up the whole unit. I mean, he has a new ability that's kind of a commander ability that does buff his unit, but I'd like to see within these War Scroll Battalions something that benefits a majority of the battalion more directly. Just other models that are within 7 inches of him, that's a relatively small area of the board, so I'm not impressed by that one in particular. But the Skaven one, we have the units required are a Skaven Warlord, 1 unit of Storm Vermin, 2 units of Warplock Jezzails, and 2 units of Storm Fiends. And this battalion is called the Skulkers of Runestruck Pass, and the abilities are Fire and Flee. Models from this battalion can shoot even if they retreated in that turn. That's pretty powerful. It's the Skaven. That's very fluffy, thematic. Skaven are cowardly. They don't like to stay in combat unless they think that they're going to win for sure. And so if you are in a situation where you're like, it's not advantageous for these units to be in melee, then by all means just pull them out and shoot your opponent as you run away. That's pretty, in my opinion, a pretty nice ability. Deadly Fusillade is the second ability. Once during the battle, the Warlord can order that a Fusillade be fired in the shooting phase. If he does so, any units of Warplock Jezzails and Storm Fiends that are within 13 inches of him can shoot twice with any missile weapon in that phase. Or, I'm sorry, any missile weapons. Roll a die for each model that attacks twice after the attacks have been carried out. On a roll of 1 or 2, the model is slain. Add 1 to the dice roll if the model is within 13 inches of the Warlord. So, you might think at first, like, you know, well, why would they not ever get the +1 to the die roll? And the important thing is that if a single model from within a unit is within range, then the entire unit counts as being within range. So, if I have a unit of, you know, Warplock Jezzails and only one of the models is within the 13 inches, the entire unit gains access to that special ability, but only the one model within the 13 inches range gets the +1 to roll and see whether or not they're slain. So that's nice. Again, it's very fluffy to the Skaven. You know, they have, in a lot of ways, really impressive technology, but whenever they push it too far, oftentimes that costs them the lives of the lesser kind of soldiers that their commanders really don't care too much about. So I feel like that, you know, when compared especially to this Fyreslayer battalion, that this is what a War Scroll battalion should be. It gives you some neat abilities that are very fluffy to the army, that are pretty powerful abilities. You know, the ability to basically avoid being attacked in close combat on your turn by firing and fleeing while still getting the missile attacks into your opponent, and the Deadly Fusillade. Those are some pretty powerful without, you know, necessarily being like borderline game-breaking abilities. I know Mitch hates that term, and I'm using it somewhat sarcastically here, but you know, they're respectable power level kind of benefits, but not over the top. But that's going to do it for this one. In the final video that we do, we're going to cover the Knight Excelsior's Vengeful Storm, and the only War Scroll battalion that I feel like in this book is overpowered, the Watcher King's Horde, which has to do with that new Gaunt Summoner of Tzeentch. But until next time, this is James, and happy gaming.